My name is Hannah. I am 31 years old, and this is the day I realized my family never truly respected me. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday afternoon. I had left the bank early, my shoulders aching from a week of mortgage applications, my mind filled with one simple plan: arrive at my beach house swing, gently on the porch, and let the sound of the ocean untangle my stress. But the moment my tires crunched against the driveway, something felt wrong. There were 4 cars already parked where only my Subaru usually sat. Not just parked, but crowding the curve like they owned the place. My stomach tightened. I told myself it could be neighbors, maybe a delivery gone wrong. Yet when I stepped out, the salty Florida air carried voices, too many voices. The sound drifted from the backyard, light laughter and busy chatter, the kind of noise you hear at parties. My gate stood open, a flagrant violation of my carefully maintained privacy. I walked faster, heart pounding, and then I froze. My sanctuary had been transformed. White folding chairs formed perfect rows across my lawn. A massive white tent loomed at the far edge, and strangers moved with casual authority, stringing lights along my porch railings. A man balanced on a ladder against my grandmother's oak tree, hanging twinkle lights, like it was his property. Another woman bent over buckets of roses, placing flowers I had not asked for into vases I did not buy. The air smelled of cut stems and expensive seafood trays. And then my eyes landed on her. Serena, my older sister, clipboard in hand, voice sharp with command pointing toward the oak tree. Make sure the lights curve through the branches. Thomas and I want that magical first dance moment. Her tone was the same one she had used since we were children, assuming directing, as if the world itself were obligated to bend for her. I stood there rooted to the stones, unable to breathe. My lawn was no longer a lawn. It was a wedding venue. My porch, the place where I had cried on lonely nights and celebrated small victories with a glass of wine, had been stolen right out from under me. I felt invisible. Serena shifted her attention to the flower arrangements. Higher. We need more drama. Did the caterer call about the seafood option? Seafood option, first dance wedding arch. That was the moment the weight of it hit me like a crashing wave. This wasn't a spontaneous setup. This was deliberate, organized, planned. My sister was holding her entire wedding at my house, and I had not even been asked. My legs finally moved. I stepped forward onto the cool stones, and for a second our eyes met. I thought I saw guilt, maybe hesitation, but it vanished in an instant, replaced by the dazzling smile she used for her friends. Hannah, perfect timing, she called, waving me over as if I were just another vendor. We need your input on the seating chart. Her words sliced deep. Input seating chart. Not a thank you, not even an explanation, just expectation. My throat tightened, but no words came. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but all I could do was stand in my own backyard and feel like an intruder. And in that moment, a truth began to surface. Quiet, chilling, undeniable. This was not my sanctuary anymore. This was my family's playground. And I was about to find out just how far they had gone behind my back. Serena's smile widened, as if she had been waiting for me all along. She walked toward me with that air of confidence she carried since childhood, the confidence that always seemed to come at my expense. Clipboard hugged against her chest pen, tapping lightly against the paper. She didn't skip a beat. Hannah, you came just in time, she said, her voice echoing across the backyard like she was hosting a rehearsal. We're finalizing the seating chart. You can help us figure out where to put Aunt Linda. You know how difficult she gets. Her words floated past me like smoke. Seating chart, difficult relatives. My mind kept circling back to the one unbearable truth: this wasn't a meeting or a dinner party. This was my sister's wedding, and it was happening here. On property that bore my name on the deed. Property I had worked myself nearly to exhaustion to buy. I swallowed hard and finally managed to ask, what exactly is going on here? Serena tilted her head, her blonde hair catching the glow of the late afternoon sun. Didn't Mom tell you the ceremony is next Saturday? We've been planning for months. Isn't this exciting? Exciting. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to scream, to shake her shoulders and demand an explanation. Instead, my voice came out small but steady. You're having your wedding here." Before she could answer, a woman in a sleek navy blazer approached with a professional smile plastered across her face. "You must be the generous sister I've heard so much about," she said warmly, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Vanessa, the wedding planner. This venue is absolutely perfect for what Serena and Thomas envisioned." Her words cut sharper than any insult. Generous sister, venue. My backyard had been renamed without my consent, repurposed into a stage for a wedding I hadn't agreed to host. I shook her hand automatically, but inside my chest a storm churned. My eyes darted toward the small table set near the porch. A neat stack of elegant cream envelopes lay there glinting in the fading light. I reached out my hand, trembling, and slid one free. The embossed lettering caught against my fingers as I pulled the card from its cover. "Joyfully invite you to celebrate the marriage of Serena Bennett and Thomas Gray." It read at the Bennett Beach House, 19 Pelican Way, Sandpiper Beach, Florida. The Bennett Beach House. My beach house. My name was nowhere in sight, yet my entire identity, my years of sacrifice, had been reduced to a backdrop for Serena's fairy tale. A laugh sharp bitter rose in my throat but died before leaving my lips. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the invitation. I glanced back at Serena. She was already busy instructing another vendor, her face glowing with satisfaction. To her, this was settled. Done. My role wasn't owner, wasn't sister. It was resource, tool, silent benefactor. The memories pressed in like unwelcome guests. The endless overtime shifts, the skipped dinners, the years of living frugally so I could make the down payment on this very house. I remembered the trembling in my hands, the day I signed the papers, the pride that surged through me when the realtor said, "Congratulations, it's yours." And then I remembered the first time my mother saw it. Her voice had sliced through my joy like a blade. Such a waste for just one person. The family could have pooled resources and bought something we could all share. I should have spoken then. I should have set the boundary that day. But instead, I had smiled, nodding faintly, trying not to let her words spoil my moment. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I gave them small pieces, they'd respect me. But now here I was, standing in the middle of my yard, drowning in decorations I had not approved, expected to smile as if this was normal. Serena's voice carried again. "Hannah, come over here. We need your help with the place settings." Her tone was cheerful, commanding the same tone she'd always used when she assumed I'd fall in line. And for a flicker of a second, I saw myself doing it. I saw myself stepping forward, arranging silverware, laughing along with the guests. I saw myself once again playing the part of the obliging little sister, the reliable one, the one who never says no. But then my eyes fell back to the invitation still clutched in my hand. My house, my address, my life packaged and sold without so much as a conversation. The calm that settled over me was almost eerie. My voice when it came was steady, even quiet. "Excuse me." Serena barely glanced up. "Where are you going?" "Don't be difficult. We have family obligations." Obligations. That word echoed in my head as I turned my keys clenched tight in my fist. Always my obligations to them, never theirs to me. I walked away from the laughter, the flowers, the twinkle lights that weren't mine. And for the first time in years, I felt something new rising in me. Not guilt, not duty. Determination. Yeah. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been expected to give up your peace just to keep family harmony? If you have, share your story in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories where people finally claim their freedom, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. I drove away that night, the cream-colored wedding invitation still clenched in my hand. The embossed letters seemed to burn into my skin, mocking me with every curve and flourish. The Bennett Beach House. That's what it said. But nowhere did it say my name. Nowhere did it honor the sacrifices, the overtime hours, the skipped vacations, the quiet loneliness I had endured to make that home mine. When I finally got back to my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my fingers still trembling. I spread the invitation open on the coffee table. The gold script gleamed under the lamplight. 150 guests had been invited to my house. 150 strangers would eat, drink, dance, and celebrate on the floors. I scrubbed the porch. I built the lawn I mowed. I wanted to tear the invitation in half. Instead, I picked up my laptop. My chest ached, but my hands moved with a strange urgency. I typed Serena Bennett wedding into the search bar, not knowing if I wanted to see what came up. What I found made my stomach twist. The very first result was Serena's Pinterest board, Beach House Dream Wedding, 8 months old. 8 months of plans and fantasies. 8 months where she poured her dreams into posts, photos, and mood boards, never once thinking to include me. I scrolled through image after image, white sand ceremonies, oceanside receptions, centerpieces taller than guests, champagne towers. And then I saw it, an actual photo of my porch. Serena and Thomas smiling, glasses raised. The caption read, "Final venue walkthrough at my amazing sister's beach house. Can't wait for our 150 guests to experience this paradise. Blessed bride, generous sister, generous sister." The words stabbed deeper than any insult. To the world, I was the doting sibling who had gladly handed over her sanctuary. To the family, I was the silent benefactor whose boundaries didn't matter. My name wasn't even in the caption, only my house. The comments beneath were worse. A cousin wrote, "So wonderful of Hannah to donate her beautiful home." An aunt chimed in, "That's what family is for." Each word piled on top of me, suffocating. I had never donated anything. My home was not theirs to give. Just when I thought I couldn't stomach more, my phone buzzed. A private message. It was from Thomas, Serena's fiancé. "I'm sorry about all this," it began. "I told Serena we should ask you properly. This wasn't my idea." For a second, I just stared at the words. Relief, anger, confusion, they all tangled inside me. He knew this was wrong. He had known all along. Yet he still stood beside her as she planned a wedding in a house that didn't belong to her. Before I could even process, my phone rang again. My mother. "There you are," she snapped when I answered. "What were you thinking driving off like that? Serena is beside herself. The planner needs your input. The caterer is waiting on final numbers." "Mom," I interrupted, my voice flat. "Did you know about this? That Serena was planning her wedding at my house without asking me?" A pause. Too long of a pause. Then she sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Of course I knew. We all did. It's not like you use that place much anyway. Serena needs this." Her words hit harder than the invitation. She knew. My father knew. They had all conspired. I pulled up my text history with them, scrolling furiously as she continued to scold me. And there it was, a message from Mom to Dad 4 months ago. "Hannah won't mind about the wedding. She never uses the house anyway. Serena says it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission." Easier to ask forgiveness than permission. The phone slipped from my hand. My own parents had dismissed me. My own blood had chosen convenience over respect. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. It wasn't about one weekend. This was about the years of disregard, the casual erasure of my ownership, the way my family had rewritten the story of my life without even asking. The invitation still lay on the table. Its golden letters no longer sparkled. They mocked. They accused. And I knew then what I had to do. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you confront your family or stay silent to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your perspective. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those invitations stacked on the table. My address, printed in elegant gold, as if I had volunteered my sanctuary. When I finally drifted off, the dreams were no better strangers wandering through my living room, children spilling juice on my sofa, laughter echoing down the hallway, as if the house belonged to them. By morning, the past came crashing in like waves against the shore. Memories I had tried to bury replayed themselves, each one reminding me that this was not the first time my family had crossed boundaries. I remembered the day I brought the keys home. My fingers had trembled with pride as I showed them the deed, my name alone on the papers. I had worked double shifts for 5 years to save that down payment. I skipped dinners, turned down vacations, ate budget lunches, just to scrape together enough to make that house mine. But instead of congratulations, I heard my mother's voice. Such a waste for one person. We could have pooled our money for something the whole family could use. I remembered Serena, champagne glass in hand, walking through the yard like it already belonged to her. "This will be perfect for family weekends," she said. She didn't even ask. She assumed. That assumption grew like weeds in my life. Within months, I discovered Mom had given a spare key to Dad, and then somehow Serena had one too. Cousins started showing up on random weekends. My lawn chairs were rearranged. My refrigerator emptied my floors sticky with spills I hadn't made. The worst part was that I let it happen. I thought if I stayed polite, if I reminded them gently, they would realize it was wrong. I tried subtle notes. "Next time, can you let me know before coming down?" But the response was always the same. "We're family. No need for formalities." I remembered coming back after a long week to find my kitchen cluttered with dishes I hadn't dirtied, wine bottles crowding the counter, and Serena's friends sprawled on the couch like they owned the place. I had to smile to swallow my anger because speaking up meant being called dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. One Christmas I arrived to find my grandmother's quilt ruined, stained with red wine. Mom brushed it off with a laugh. "Accidents happen. Don't be so uptight." Another summer, muddy footprints tracked across my bedroom carpet from someone's dog. I scrubbed until my knees ached, but no one offered to help. Each incident chipped away at me piece by piece until I hardly recognized my own home. It wasn't a retreat anymore. It was a revolving door, a vacation rental without rent. And still I stayed quiet. But sitting there now, replaying the sound of Serena's cheerful voice ordering vendors around in my yard, I realized silence had cost me everything. My family mistook my politeness for permission. They mistook my boundaries for suggestions. They mistook my sacrifices for obligations. The anger rose hot and sharp, but underneath it was something steadier resolve. I picked up the deed from my filing cabinet, smoothed it with trembling hands, and stared at the bold letters, "Hannah Miller, sole owner." Not the Bennett Beach house, not the family property, mine. Every mortgage payment, every insurance bill, every repair receipt came from me alone. For years I had let them blur the lines, but those lines had always been clear. I just hadn't enforced them. Now I would, because this wasn't about a wedding. It wasn't even about Serena. It was about the fact that I had allowed myself to become invisible in my own story. And if I didn't stop it now, it would never end. I closed the folder, my decision burning bright in my chest. The next time they tried to claim my house as theirs, they wouldn't be met with silence. They would be met with something they hadn't seen in me before: strength. Have you ever stayed quiet to keep the peace only to realize silence made things worse? Share your story below. It might just give someone else the courage to speak up. The following evening, I sat hunched over my laptop, the glow of the screen washing across my living room. I couldn't let this go. Not anymore. So I typed again, "Serena Bennett wedding." This time I dug deeper. The results confirmed what I already suspected, but the details turned my anger into something sharper. Serena's Pinterest board wasn't just a few photos of flowers and dresses. It was an entire vision, 8 months in the making. 8 months of decisions. 8 months of assuming my house was hers to use. Her captions felt like slaps across the face. "Beach house dream wedding. Final walkthrough at my sister's amazing home. So blessed to have such a generous family." Each post had dozens of comments from relatives. That's what family is for. "Hannah is so thoughtful. She's always been the responsible one." The more I scrolled, the tighter my chest became. It wasn't admiration, it was entitlement disguised as praise. They weren't grateful, they were relieved. Relieved that I, as always, would shoulder the weight so Serena could shine. Then on Instagram, I saw a picture that made me drop my phone onto the carpet. Serena and Thomas clinking glasses on my porch. My porch, the one I had sanded and painted with my own hands. The caption read, "Can't wait for our 150 guests to experience this paradise. 3-day celebration coming soon." 3-day celebration. At my expense, at my house, without my permission. For a moment, my breath came shallow and fast. I pressed a hand against my chest, trying to ground myself. But then my phone buzzed again, this time a private message. It was Thomas. "Hannah, I'm sorry. I told Serena we should ask you. This wasn't my idea." I stared at the words. They blurred, then sharpened again. So he knew. He knew it was wrong. Yet he stood there smiling in photos, holding champagne, pretending nothing was amiss. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again, then deleted. What could I say? That I appreciated his honesty, even though it was useless, that he had failed to act, failed to stand up to the woman he planned to marry. Before I could decide, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "There you are," she said, her voice brisk. "What on earth were you thinking storming off like that?" Serena is beside herself. "The planner needs your input on several things." "Mom," I interrupted, forcing steel into my tone. Did you know Serena was planning her entire wedding at my house without asking me?" There was a pause. Then casually, almost dismissively, she said, "Of course I knew. We all did. You never use that place much anyway. Serena needs this." The air left my lungs. My worst fear was true. They hadn't just overlooked me, they had deliberately excluded me. My hands shook as I opened my text history. Scrolling quickly, I found it a message exchange between Mom and Dad from 4 months ago. "Hannah won't mind about the wedding. She never uses the house anyway." And then Dad's reply, "Should we at least mention it, Mom?" Better not. She might overthink it. Serena says it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission. The words made my skin crawl. My own parents had decided that my feelings, my ownership didn't matter. That it was easier to deceive me, easier to treat me as an obstacle instead of a partner. I let the phone slide from my hand and sat there staring into the quiet of my apartment. For years I had told myself they didn't mean harm, that they were careless, not cruel, but here was the proof. It was calculated, planned. They had chosen Serena's happiness over my dignity, and as painful as that was, it also gave me clarity. This wasn't about the beach house. This wasn't even about the wedding. This was about respect. And I had finally reached the moment when silence was no longer an option. But before I tell you what I discovered next, let me ask, have you ever uncovered proof that your family betrayed your trust? Share it in the comments. And if you don't want to miss how I turned this betrayal into something powerful, make sure you subscribe now. The next day, the weight of betrayal pressed heavier on my chest than the humid Florida air outside my apartment window. I sat at my kitchen table, the laptop still open from the night before evidence of Serena's deceit splashed across the glowing screen. I thought I had reached the worst of it, but I hadn't. I scrolled further, my fingers trembling, until I landed on a thread that froze me completely, a family group chat I didn't even know existed. My stomach dropped as I read message after message. My cousins joked about carpooling down for the big weekend at Hannah's place. My aunts debated whether to bring extra chairs or rely on the rental company. My parents chimed in about food preferences, wine lists, and lodging for out-of-town guests. Every word carried the same assumption Hannah has offered. Hannah is fine with this. Hannah is generous. But I had never offered. I had never agreed. I had been erased from the planning of my own house, turned into a character in a script written entirely by them. I closed the laptop and pulled open my filing cabinet. I needed something solid, something that reminded me of the truth. My hands brushed over the folder and I pulled it free, the deed. I spread it flat across the table, the paper cool beneath my palms. My name alone was there in bold type, Hannah Miller, not Serena, not Mom or Dad, me. I added the mortgage statements to the pile, the ones stamped paid in my handwriting, the utility bills, the insurance paperwork. Every page bore my name, my bank account, my sacrifices. My fingers clenched so tight the edges cut against my skin. This wasn't about sharing. This wasn't about generosity. This was about theft dressed up as family tradition. I sat back, my heart pounding, and whispered aloud, "They've stolen from me." The phrase startled me, but it was true. They had stolen my peace, my privacy, my voice. And now they wanted to steal the most important day of Serena's life and force me to foot the bill. My phone buzzed against the table, dragging me back. It was Marlene, my best friend since college. Her voice was sharp when I answered. "Your sister's wedding, I just got an invitation with your beach house listed as the venue. Hannah, what is going on?" Hearing it out loud nearly broke me. My voice shook as I explained everything. The hidden planning, the Pinterest board, the family group chat, the way my parents had conspired to keep me in the dark. When I finished, silence stretched on the other end. Then Marlene said firmly, "You're not crazy for being upset. This is outrageous. What are you going to do?" Her question hung heavy in the air. For so long, my answer would have been nothing. Endure. Stay quiet. Keep the peace. But this time something shifted deep inside me. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm done being a doormat. Later that afternoon at work, my coworker James noticed my distraction during lunch. When I told him the story in broad strokes, he gave a knowing nod. Let me guess they crossed a boundary and expect you to accept it. His words struck a nerve. I looked up surprised. How did you know? Been there, he said. My brother used to borrow my car whenever he wanted. Kept doing it until I changed the locks on my house where I kept the keys. Family can be the worst boundary violators because they think they're entitled to forgiveness. Stand firm, Hannah. Otherwise, they'll never stop. His words settled into me like stones into water, heavy, undeniable, permanent. That evening, I drove past the beach house again. From across the street, I watched as Serena directed florists and caterers in my yard. My sanctuary was still overrun. My anger crystallized into resolve. The next day, I went to the hardware store. I bought new locks gleaming silver in their packaging and a set of security cameras. When the locksmith arrived, I watched as he removed the old brass keyholes and replaced them with new unmarked steel. By sunset, my house was mine again, secured, guarded, untouchable. But that wasn't enough. That night I sat at my desk and drafted an email. My fingers flew over the keys, steady, deliberate. The subject line read, Beach House Access. Effective immediately, anyone wishing to visit my property at 19 Pelican Way must contact me directly for permission and access arrangements. For security reasons, the locks have been changed. Sincerely, Hannah Miller. I hit send and the silence afterward felt like a door closing. My phone buzzed almost instantly. Mom, Dad, Serena, dozens of missed calls, messages poured in demanding, pleading, scolding. But I didn't answer, because for the first time I wasn't reacting out of fear, I was acting out of power. Have you ever taken one small step to reclaim control of your life only to feel the entire world shift with it? Tell me your moment in the comments, and if you want to see how I transformed this betrayal into strength, make sure you subscribe. You'll want to hear what comes next. The backlash came swiftly, like a storm rolling in from the horizon. My phone lit up nonstop, each vibration a demand for attention. Serena's number flashed across the screen more times than I could count, her voice spilling into my voicemail, trembling with rage. How could you be so selfish right before my wedding? You're ruining everything. I've been planning this for months. Her words played in my ear, shrill and desperate, but something inside me had changed. Where once I would have felt guilt tightening around my chest, now there was only clarity. This was my property, my sanctuary, my life. I responded with a single message. This is my house. Purchased with my money. No one uses it without my permission. Then I muted my phone. For hours, I sat in my apartment listening to the quiet. No buzzing, no notifications, just the sound of my own breathing. It felt foreign peace, actual peace, because I had finally drawn a line that could not be ignored. But peace never lasts long when a family is used to trampling boundaries. The next morning at work, I was hunched over a mortgage file when James leaned over the partition. You've been quieter than usual, he said. I gave him the shortened version, the wedding, the invasion, the locks. His eyebrows rose and then he smiled in that knowing way again. Good, they needed to hear no. Don't back down now. His words echoed in my head all afternoon, and then the universe tested me. The elevator dinged and when I looked up, my heart sank. My mother striding across the marble floor in her powder blue pantsuit and pearl's heels clicking against the tile. Her shoulders squared with purpose, her mouth pressed thin with disapproval. She had always been a master of public performance, and she was here to deliver one. I shot up before she could reach my desk, intercepting her near the water cooler. Mom, this is my workplace. And apparently the only place I can reach you, she hissed, her voice, pitched just loud enough to make nearby colleagues pause their typing. Since you've decided to ignore everyone's calls and change the locks without warning, the old me would have wilted. I would have dragged her into a conference room apologizing for the scene, desperate to smooth things over, but not anymore. I kept my tone calm, my voice steady. We can talk after work, Bayside Cafe, 5:30, or not at all. She blinked, startled by my firmness. For once, she didn't have a retort ready. She nodded stiffly and turned on her heel, leaving behind a wake of silence. James whistled low as I returned to my desk. That was impressive. I smiled faintly. I was as surprised as he was. That evening I drove to the cafe. Through the window I saw them waiting, my mother, my father Serena, and to my shock, Aunt Linda, the family's unofficial judge and jury. The corner table looked like a tribunal, 4 pairs of eyes trained on the door. Marlene sat in the passenger seat beside me, my self-declared boundary bodyguard. She squeezed my hand. "You don't have to go in." "Yes," I said, exhaling slowly. "I do." Inside, Serena didn't even wait for me to sit. Her eyes glistened with practiced tears. "My dream wedding is ruined," she announced, her voice cracking just enough for sympathy. "The alternative venue is half the size. Thomas's family is questioning everything." Father cleared his throat, using that measured business tone he always relied on. "Pumpkin, we understand you were surprised by the arrangements, but surely we can work something out." Then Mother chimed in, her voice trembling. "After everything we've done for you, I gave up my career, drove you to piano lessons for 8 years. Lessons I begged to quit after 3 months," I said quietly. The table fell into stunned silence. Aunt Linda leaned forward, eyes sharp as glass. "Hannah, in this family we support each other. Your grandfather would be ashamed to see this selfishness." The nuclear option. Grandpa Joe, the ultimate authority even in death. But I had come prepared. I leaned forward, meeting Serena's gaze first. "Name one time you asked permission before using my house. Just one." She opened her mouth, then shut it. I turned to my parents. "Name one visit where you left the house exactly as you found it. One occasion when you didn't bring extra people without asking. One single time you treated it as my property, not a family timeshare." The silence was thick, suffocating. They couldn't answer, because the truth was undeniable. For years I had played the role of the responsible one, the forgiving one, the sister who absorbed the blows, but no more. And as I stared across that table, calm and unwavering, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for respect. I was demanding it. Tell me this, have you ever sat across from your family, called out their behavior, and watched the room fall silent? Share that moment below. And if you want to see how I delivered the final blow, subscribe now. The best, or maybe the hardest part, is still coming. The silence at that dinner table could have cracked glass. I had thrown down a challenge none of them could answer, and they knew it. For once, their words, those sharp little weapons I had grown up fearing, had no effect. They shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between one another, waiting for someone to salvage the moment. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "No one's denying there may have been miscommunications," he said, as if years of disrespect could be dismissed with a polite euphemism. But I didn't let him finish. "It's done," I said, my voice steady. "The house is rented to Sandpiper Tours for the next 3 weekends, including Serena's wedding date. The contract is signed, the deposit is paid." Serena's tears vanished like smoke. She sat upright, her face twisting in disbelief. "You what?" I slid a folder across the table, the paper crisp against the wood. "This is the agreement. Legal. Binding. The property is no longer available." Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "You can't do this." "I already did." My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest as if I had confessed to a crime. "Hannah, how could you betray your own family?" "Betray," I repeated, my calm so sharp it startled even me. "I bought that house with my money. I maintained it with my money, and I rented it as I saw fit." The words left my mouth like arrows, striking every excuse before it could form. That night back at my apartment, I finalized every detail. The rental agreement sat on my coffee table, signed and dated. My lawyer's letter affirming my exclusive rights as the owner was ready to send if needed. The security cameras were already live feeding footage directly to my phone. As I laid each document out before me, I realized something powerful. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming myself. For years, I had allowed their assumptions to cage me. Now, for the first time, I felt the lock turn from the inside. My phone buzzed. It was Thomas. His message was quiet, respectful. "I respect what you're doing, even though I can't say it publicly yet. This wasn't right from the beginning." I stared at his words for a long moment. There was honesty there, maybe even regret. But it didn't matter. His silence had helped build this problem, and I had already chosen my side. Later, as I prepared for bed, doubt crept in. Had I gone too far? Would they ever forgive me? But then an image came unbidden. Serena's friends rummaging through my bedroom drawers at last year's small gathering. The taste of humiliation when Mom laughed off my protests. The sting of silence when Dad dismissed my hurt with a wave of his hand. No, this wasn't cruelty, this was survival. I climbed into bed, my body sinking into the sheets with unfamiliar relief. For the first time in years, I didn't toss or sweat through nightmares of lost control. I slept soundly, the documents stacked neatly on the coffee table, like sentinels standing guard. When morning sunlight streamed across the floor, I knew something had shifted forever. The balance of power had changed. My family could rage guilt or threaten, but the truth was written in ink and paper. This house, my house, was finally under my control. For what about you? Have you ever taken a step so bold your family couldn't undo it? Share your story below. I want to know how you claimed your power. And stay tuned because the real showdown was still ahead. The morning of the setup arrived, and with it the storm I had been waiting for. I parked across the street from my beach house binoculars in hand, my heart thundering against my ribs. From that safe distance, I watched as my family moved like bees around a hive. Serena stood in the center of the yard, clipboard clutched tightly, directing vendors with the authority of a general. The arch needs to line up with the ocean view. Those chairs should curve. This isn't a high school graduation. Her voice carried sharp and commanding. My mother fussed over the flower beds, kneeling in the dirt, arranging roses, and baby's breath like she was decorating her own garden. Dad followed behind the caterer, nodding at everything, glancing at his watch as though he were the host of the event. And then, right on schedule, the white van appeared. Coastal Florida Tours. Their logo shined across the side, bold and unmistakable. 2 more vehicles pulled in behind each one, packed with uniformed employees carrying clipboards and crates of supplies. I lifted the binoculars just in time to catch the first ripples of confusion. The tour manager, a tall woman with silver hair pulled tight in a bun, strode across the lawn with confidence. She extended a hand toward Serena, who stiffened visibly. Even from across the street, I could read her body language, her spine locked, her head tilted in disbelief. My phone buzzed. A text from the tour manager: "We've made contact. Contract presented as instructed." I smiled grimly. The stage was set. Back in the yard, chaos bloomed. My dad rushed to intercept the tour employee's hands waving frantically. My mom's mouth moved in hurried protests, her phone already pressed against her ear. Serena's arms flailed as she argued with the manager, her perfect wedding vision unraveling thread by thread. Moments later, 3 cars pulled into the already crowded driveway, early guests. I almost felt sorry for them as they stepped out. Confusion etched across their faces, greeted not by music and champagne, but by frantic explanations and heated voices. My phone erupted with calls: Mom, Dad, Serena, over and over. I let them all go to voicemail. When Serena finally called for the 6th time, I answered. "What did you do?" Her voice cracked through the line, trembling with fury. "Hello to you too," I said, my tone steady. "There are people here saying they have a contract. For a tour group. Tomorrow. At your house. My wedding is tomorrow." "My house," I corrected. "Not your wedding venue." "This is your house," she shrieked. "You can tell them to leave." "You never asked me, Serena. Not once. You assumed. And this is what happens when you assume instead of asking for permission." Her voice wavered between rage and panic. "You have to fix this. Call them off. Please." But I didn't waver. The house is not available. Not tomorrow. Not for the weekend. And I ended the call. Through the binoculars, I watched the fallout unfold like a play. Mom desperate, pacing with her phone. Dad gesturing wildly at guests now retreating back to their cars. Serena locked in heated debate with her wedding planner, her arms slicing through the air. An hour later, social media lit up. Posts shifted from excitement about the beautiful beach wedding to murmurs of confusion. "Does anyone know what happened?" one cousin wrote. "What about the generous sister's offer?" The illusion had cracked. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Thomas. His voice was calm, almost resigned. "Hannah, I want you to know I always felt uncomfortable about using your house without asking. I understand why you did this. My parents have agreed to host in their backyard. It won't be the beach, but it'll work." For the first time, someone acknowledged the truth. Not generous sister, not selfish sister, just Hannah, the owner. I lowered the binoculars and leaned back in my seat. My house was no longer their stage. It was mine again. But as I drove away, I knew this wasn't over. The wedding might have been rerouted, but the real confrontation, the one that would decide whether my family ever respected me, was still waiting. So, what would you do if your family pushed you to the edge like this? Would you stand firm or give in for the sake of peace? Tell me in the comments, and stay with me because what happened next was the breaking point none of us could avoid. The wedding that was supposed to be the crown jewel of Serena's life had crumbled in the space of an afternoon. My phone kept buzzing with angry texts and voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. Mom begged me to reconsider. Dad tried his calm businessman tone, and Serena left message after message laced with fury. But I stayed silent, because the truth was already set in stone, or more precisely on paper. That evening I met them again. It wasn't at the cafe this time. They insisted on a family dinner, and I knew it was going to be an ambush. I arrived to find my mother, father Serena, and Aunt Linda all seated at the same corner table. Their faces were tense lips, pressed into thin lines, eyes sharp with accusation. I sat down, refusing to shrink into myself. Serena started first, her voice breaking into sobs. My dream wedding is gone. The new venue is half the size, and everyone is questioning why we moved. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? I kept my voice calm. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to discover 150 invitations had been sent with my address on them, without my knowledge? She flinched but didn't answer. Dad leaned forward, folding his hands together. Pumpkin, we all understand you were surprised. But this is family. We can find a compromise. Everyone makes sacrifices for the people they love. The words might have swayed me once, but not now. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, the one with the rental contract from Sandpiper Tours. I slid it across the table slowly, deliberately. There's no compromise to make. The property is already under contract. Signed, sealed, binding. They froze. Even Aunt Linda, who had entered the dinner with fire in her eyes, hesitated. Serena snatched the papers, her hands trembling as she scanned the signatures. You rented it out. You actually did that. Yes, I said simply, because it's my house. Not a family asset, not a free venue. Mine. My mother's voice cracked, trembling with indignation. How could you betray your sister like this, after all we've done for you? I leaned back, my gaze steady. What you've done for me, or what I've done for you? How many weekends did I spend cleaning up after gatherings I never agreed to? How many times did I ask politely for respect only to be ignored? The silence was deafening. Serena's face crumpled into anger. You ruined everything. You destroyed the most important day of my life. No, I said softly, but with iron in my tone. You did that yourself the moment you decided my house was yours to take. Actions have consequences, Serena. This is one of them. Her mouth opened to protest, but I didn't let her. I tapped the contract. You want to fight this, take it to court. I'll be more than happy to show a judge the deed with my name on it. The table fell into stunned quiet. For the first time in years, I saw it hesitation, doubt. They weren't sure how to respond because I had something stronger than their manipulation. I had the law. Aunt Linda, usually the loudest critic, finally broke the silence. She's right, she said reluctantly, her voice low. If the contract is signed, there's nothing you can do. Serena glared at her betrayal flashing in her eyes, but it was too late. The truth had landed heavy and unshakable. I stood gathering my things. I'm done being treated like a resource. This is my final word. The house is not available. It never was. As I walked out of that restaurant, my heart pounded, but not with fear, with power. They could hate me, call me selfish, paint me as the villain. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't bending to their story. I was writing my own. What would you have done at that table? Stood your ground or caved to keep the peace? Share your answer in the comments. I want to know if you'd be strong enough to walk away. The day before Serena's wedding dawned with skies clear and blue, the kind of weather brides dream about. But while most of the family was scrambling to make last-minute arrangements at their hastily chosen backup venue, I sat across the street from my beach house, binoculars in hand once more. My chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Today would be the ultimate test of boundaries. Through the lenses, I watched Serena move across my lawn, her clipboard clutched tight, barking orders at anyone within earshot. The arch needs to be perfectly centered with the ocean view. The chairs should curve. This is not a graduation ceremony, it's a wedding. Her voice had that familiar sharpness, the same tone she had used since we were little girls. Only now it wasn't directed at me alone, it was unleashed at everyone within range. My mother bustled around the flower beds, humming to herself as she arranged roses and baby's breath into my stone planters. She looked almost serene, like this moment was hers to cherish, as if decades of ownership rested in her hands rather than mine. Dad followed the caterer around the tent, nodding at every instruction, glancing at his watch, as though he were the host. They moved with complete confidence, utterly certain that today was theirs to control. And then, like clockwork, the white van appeared. Coastal Florida Tours. The logo gleamed in the sunlight as the van pulled into my driveway, followed by 2 more vehicles. The doors opened, and 7 uniformed employees stepped out with clipboards, crates, and equipment. Their presence was like a needle piercing a balloon. Confusion rippled across my family instantly. I zoomed the binoculars closer, catching every detail. The tour manager, tall and poised, strode toward Serena and extended a hand. Her professional smile didn't waver as she presented the contract. I could practically read the shock on Serena's face as she skimmed the papers, her posture stiffening, her perfect plans unraveling in seconds. My phone buzzed. "We've made contact." Contract presented as instructed. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had arranged. From across the street, I watched chaos erupt. My father intercepted the staff, his hands waving frantically, as if sheer force of will could dismiss a legal agreement. My mother clutched her pearls, her phone glued to her ear, undoubtedly calling every venue within 50 miles. Serena gestured wildly at the wedding planner, her arms slicing through the air as her voice grew louder and more desperate. And then came the guests. 3 cars pulled into the already crowded driveway. Early arrivals dressed for celebration, stepping out with gifts and smiles that froze instantly as they took in the scene. Uniformed staff setting up rows of chairs facing the ocean, informational placards about marine life, stacked neatly on tables. Dad rushed over, explaining with exaggerated gestures. One woman raised her hands to her face in shock. Another shook her head, visibly confused. My phone buzzed again, call after call. Mom, Dad, Serena, then again and again. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, Serena's number appeared for the 6th time. I answered. Her voice was ragged with fury. "What did you do?" I kept my tone calm. "Hello to you, too. There are people here saying they have a contract for a tour group. Tomorrow, at your house. My wedding is tomorrow." "My house," I corrected, my voice sharp as glass. "Not your wedding venue." She screamed. "This is your house. You can tell them to leave." "You never asked me, Serena." I said, my tone even. "You assumed. And this is what happens when you assume. The house is not available tomorrow, not for the weekend." Her breathing was ragged. "You have to fix this. Please, I'm begging you." "No," I said softly. "You have to live with the choices you made." And I ended the call. Through the binoculars, I watched her crumble. My mother frantic, still working her phone. My father waving his arms at bewildered guests. Serena locked in a shouting match with her planner. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. "So, would you have stood your ground even knowing it would ruin your sister's wedding? Or would you have caved under the pressure?" Comment below. I want to hear your honest answer. By the time the sun dipped lower over the horizon, the reality could no longer be denied. My family's dream of a flawless beach wedding had shattered. Guests shuffled back to their cars, murmuring in confusion. The florist packed away unused bouquets. Even the wedding planner, once so composed, looked frazzled, her clipboard shaking in her hands as Serena ranted beside her. I lowered the binoculars and leaned back against the seat of my car. A wave of calm washed over me. For the first time, the chaos wasn't mine to fix. It was theirs. Not long after, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Serena, it was Thomas. His voice was calm, measured, almost apologetic. "Hannah, he said I want you to know I always felt uncomfortable about using your house without asking. My parents have agreed to host the ceremony in their backyard. It won't be the beach, but we'll make it work." I closed my eyes for a moment, listening. There was no defensiveness, no anger, just quiet acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." He hesitated before adding, "I understand why you did this. It should have never gotten this far." When the call ended, I sat in my car for a long moment, absorbing his words. It wasn't vindication exactly, but it was validation. Someone had finally said what I had been screaming inside my head for months: this was wrong. The next morning, social media confirmed what I had already suspected. The wedding was moved. Photos surfaced of Serena and Thomas standing beneath an arch hastily assembled in his parents' backyard. Guests smiled politely, their expressions strained. The grandeur of the beach house had been replaced with folding chairs and patchy grass. And me, I wasn't there. Instead, I walked through my quiet beach house, now occupied by the Sandpiper Tours team. They had transformed the yard into a polished event space for a corporate retreat. Rows of beach chairs faced the water, informational placards described marine life, and a registration table stood neatly at the front porch. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't personal, but it was mine, done on my terms, under my authority, with my permission. And that distinction made all the difference. Later that day, I received a text from Aunt Gloria, one of the few relatives who hadn't piled on during the weeks of chaos. "Always thought it was strange how they used your house without asking. Standing your ground takes courage. Good for you." Her words made me smile. Maybe not everyone in the family agreed with Serena. Maybe some had silently seen the truth all along. As I sat on the porch swing that evening, the ocean breeze brushing across my skin, I realized something. This wasn't about punishing Serena. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about reclaiming ownership of my home, yes, but also of myself. For years, I had lived under the weight of obligation. I had sacrificed my peace to keep family harmony. I had swallowed my voice so Serena could shine brighter. But now, sitting there with the sea stretching endlessly before me, I knew those days were over. I had drawn a line, and I had kept it. Still deep inside, I sensed the storm wasn't finished. Weddings end, but resentment lingers. My family had lost their perfect venue, and I had gained my freedom. What they would do with their anger remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm. Because I had finally learned how to stand. "What? You've stayed with me this far, but trust me, the story isn't done." What came next tested everything I thought I had learned about boundaries. Stick with me, because the final confrontation with my parents was the hardest one yet. The wedding weekend came and went. Photos trickled onto social media, smiling faces in Thomas's parents' backyard, makeshift decorations. Serena, in her gown, standing against a plain wooden arch. It wasn't the glamorous beach celebration she had planned, and though she smiled in every shot, her eyes looked tight, her smile forced. I thought perhaps the storm had passed, but only 3 days later my doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw them, my parents, standing shoulder to shoulder, stiff with indignation. My father's jaw was tight, my mother's lips pressed into a line. They looked less like visitors and more like prosecutors ready to present a case. I opened the door. "Come in," I said calmly, gesturing toward the living room. Inside, 3 glasses of water already waited on coasters. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in my head a dozen times. My mother perched on the couch, her posture rigid, while my father leaned forward, hands clasped. "Hannah Elizabeth Miller," my mother began, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "How could you humiliate your sister this way? Her wedding was in shambles because of you." My father added, softer but no less stern, "After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us, by destroying Serena's special day." I didn't flinch. Instead, I slid a thick blue folder across the coffee table. "I'd like you to see something." My mother frowned, but I opened the folder myself, spreading out the contents. Photographs, receipts, emails, text messages. "This is 5 years of boundary violations at my beach house," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. I laid down the first photo, my grandmother's quilt stained with wine after one of Serena's unauthorized gatherings. 17 empty bottles, I said softly. No one offered to replace it. Next came a shot of cigarette burns on my deck furniture, then muddy paw prints stamped across my bedroom carpet. "Your cousin's dog," I reminded them. I scrubbed the stains alone. My father shifted in his seat. "That's just normal wear and tear." This isn't normal, I cut him off, pulling out receipts. These are the repair costs. Look at the signatures. All mine. I never asked for a dime from any of you. My mother's face flushed red. We're family. We shouldn't need formal invitations or rules. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. Family respects each other, and respect has been missing for years. I placed another document on top of the pile, the deed. My name bold at the top, every page stamped with my ownership. Then the mortgage statements, the insurance policy, all mine. This house was never yours to take, and that wedding invitation printed without my knowledge was the last straw. For the first time, my mother faltered. Her eyes darted across the evidence spread before her, her voice quieter when she finally spoke. I never saw it from your perspective. My father rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. We didn't think. It wasn't our intention. Intent doesn't erase impact, I interrupted. I love you both. But from now on, things change. I pulled out one final sheet of paper. Here are my terms. No one visits without explicit permission. I require advance notice and confirmation. All copies of my keys must be returned immediately. My father's face darkened. You can't dictate this. I can, I said firmly. And I am. These aren't requests, they are requirements. The silence stretched heavy between us. Finally, my father reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and set it on the table. My mother hesitated, then added hers beside it. Serena has one too, my mother admitted. I'll get it from her, I replied. They stood to leave the weight of years of unchecked entitlement pressing down on their shoulders. At the door, my mother paused. Will you come to Sunday dinner next week? I met her eyes steadily. I'll let you know by Thursday if I'm available. Something shifted, then a flicker of recognition, maybe even respect. She nodded once before stepping outside. When the door closed, I picked up the keys they had surrendered. Cool metal against my palm, heavy with meaning. For the first time, I felt like the true owner of my own life. Have you ever had to confront your parents and lay out evidence of their disregard? Would you have had the courage to set terms like this? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how the story ends with Serena herself, make sure you subscribe. The silence in my apartment after my parents left was unlike anything I had ever felt. Not the silence of isolation, not the silence of being ignored, but the silence of victory. On my coffee table lay the 2 keys they had returned, gleaming under the lamp. Symbols of control I had finally reclaimed. For years I had begged for small gestures of respect. A phone call before visiting, a text if they wanted to bring friends, just an acknowledgement that this house belonged to me. Instead, I had been laughed at, brushed aside, made to feel dramatic. Now, the weight was shifting. They could no longer wave away my voice. Still, my father's warning lingered in the back of my mind. Serena won't take this well. He was right. My sister had never handled limits with grace. To her, boundaries were insults walls built only to keep her from what she believed was hers. I poured a glass of water and sat back on the couch, letting the tension in my shoulders ease. For the first time, I believed my parents had truly seen me. Maybe not fully, maybe not with joy, but they had seen. That was a start. The following week proved it. For years, Sunday dinners had been treated like obligations. My mother would assume, not ask, that I'd be there. But this time on Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with her message. Will you be joining us this Sunday? It was simple, ordinary, but to me it was revolutionary. My time was being respected. I replied, yes, I'll come. At dinner, the air was strange at first. My father poured his own water without assuming he could take mine. My mother asked about work instead of ordering me to handle the dishes. Small things, but they built a bridge I had thought impossible. Of course, not everyone adapted so quickly. Aunt Patricia pulled me aside, her voice sharp. You're holding a grudge, Hannah. Family should be about forgiveness. Uncle Steve added his opinion a few days later on the phone. Family means unlimited access. That's how it's always been. But I no longer crumbled under those words. I nodded politely, then ended the conversation when I was ready. Their opinions no longer outweighed my peace. And then there was Serena. The first time we crossed paths after the wedding disaster, she looked at me as though I had committed treason. Her eyes burned, her lips pressed into a line so tight I thought it might disappear. She didn't yell, though. She didn't throw accusations. She simply walked past me in silence, and in that silence was a storm. But her silence didn't scare me anymore. Back at home, I sat on my porch swing, the ocean breeze brushing against my face. My house was quiet again, free of uninvited footsteps, free of the constant fear of coming home to strangers. I ran my hand along the armrest of the swing, remembering nights when I had sat there crying, wishing someone would see me. Now I saw myself, and that was enough. One evening as the sun dipped into the water, I opened my laptop. There was a new message waiting from Thomas. His words were simple. Serena is angry, but I respect you. Thank you for standing your ground. I closed the laptop, a soft smile tugging at my lips. Serena might never forgive me, but I had stopped living for her forgiveness long ago. The truth was clear. Intent does not erase impact, and no amount of family tradition, no speeches about sacrifice could erase the years of disrespect. They had crossed the line too many times, and now that line was written in stone. As I locked the door that night and slid the new keys safely into the drawer, I felt lighter, stronger, more whole than I had in years. The storm wasn't over. Serena would come and she would test me. But for now, I had what I had always wanted: my house, my peace, my life. Have you ever reached that moment when you finally stopped explaining yourself and simply lived by your rules? Share that moment in the comments. And if you want to see how my showdown with Serena ended, make sure you subscribe. You'll want to hear this. 6 months passed before Serena finally stood on my porch again. By then, the storm had quieted. The house was mine in every sense of the word. New locks, new furniture, and new peace. No surprise visits, no wine-stained quilts or cigarette burns. Just me, my routines, and a life free from constant intrusion. That morning sunlight spilled across the deck as I arranged cushions on the porch swing. I had chosen soft teal fabric to match the sea. Wind chimes tinkled in the breeze, and for the first time in years, I felt at home. Truly at home. The doorbell rang at exactly 11. Through the peephole, I saw Serena, her hands clasped nervously, her posture uncertain. For once, there was no clipboard, no air of command, only hesitation. I opened the door, waiting. "Thanks for letting me visit," she said quietly, her tone careful, almost deferential. I stepped aside. "Come in." In the kitchen, I had set out a simple lunch sandwich as fruit, nothing extravagant. She sat where I gestured, her eyes wandering over the changes. My shelves, once cluttered with her forgotten magazines, now held my favorite novels. Family photos still hung, but rearranged, present, but no longer dominating. "I like what you've done with the place," she said, offering a tentative smile. "Thank you," I replied, sitting across from her. For a while we spoke of safe topics, work, weather, small details of daily life. But then, as silence settled, Serena lowered her gaze to the table. "I never really thought about how we treated your house before," she admitted. Her fingers picked at the edge of her napkin. "I just assumed that it was partly mine too." I met her eyes. "It wasn't. It never was." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, and I'm sorry." The words hung between us, fragile but real. For years I had begged for acknowledgement. Now finally it came. Not perfect, not complete, but sincere. At 4 o'clock, she glanced at her watch and stood. I should go. I walked her to the door. "Thank you for respecting my time." Her smile was tentative but genuine. This was nice. "Maybe we could do it again sometime." "I'd like that," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. That evening I sat on the porch with Marlene and 2 new friends from my pottery class. We poured wine into mismatched glasses, laughed as the sun dipped into the horizon, and watched the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Serena: "Thanks for having me over today. Looking forward to next time, with permission, of course." I smiled, setting the phone aside. Boundaries hadn't shrunk my world. They had expanded it, making room for friendships, peace, and relationships built on respect rather than obligation. For years I had feared that saying no would mean losing my family. But now I knew the truth. Saying no didn't destroy relationships, it clarified them. Those who truly valued me would adjust. Those who didn't would fall away. As the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility, I leaned back in the swing glass in hand and whispered the words I had once doubted I'd ever say. This is what home should feel like. If you've ever discovered that boundaries didn't push people away, but instead drew the right ones closer, Tell me in the comments. And if you're ready to hear another story about someone reclaiming their freedom, click on the next video. I promise you it will stay with you. 6 months later, life feels different in ways I never imagined. My beach house, once the source of endless conflict, has become the truest reflection of who I am. Every corner of it carries my fingerprint, my choices, my peace, my boundaries. The teal cushions on the porch swing the shelves filled with books I love, the soft chime of wind bells drifting with the ocean breeze, all of it whispers freedom. My career has flourished too. Standing up for myself at home gave me the courage to do the same at work. When a senior vice president tried to claim my restructuring idea as his own, I found my voice. Actually, I developed this strategy, I said, steady and sure. That moment changed everything. A month later, I earned the promotion I'd been chasing for years. Even with my parents, the dynamic has shifted. They still stumble, still forget sometimes, but they ask now. They pause. They treat my time and my space with care they once lacked. It isn't perfect, but it is progress, and progress is enough. Serena is learning too, slowly, cautiously. When she texted me last week, she ended with 4 words I never thought I'd see if you're okay with it. Boundaries, I've realized, don't cage us in. They carve out space for love to grow without suffocation. They don't end relationships, they reveal which ones are built on respect. As I sit on my porch, friends laughing beside me, the horizon glowing in hues of orange and pink, I breathe deeply. For the first time in years, I'm not bracing for intrusion or betrayal. I am home, in every sense of the word, and finally I am free.